Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show, where we talk all things vegan. If you're not already vegan, no worries, we'll get you there. If you are, tune in for health advice, information on climate change, and all the damage done by our most destructive industry, animal agriculture. We'll also talk cooking, theater, film, and culture. My two reasons for starting this podcast: to entertain, to inform, and to make people vegan. Oh, that's 3. Shit. Welcome to the Glenn Mercer Show. You could find us across all your favorite podcast platforms. You could find us on YouTube. Please remember to subscribe. We've just passed the threshold of 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so we're bumping up against the next milestone, 1 million. Help us get there, please. My special guest today, coming from his gazebo in Rochester, New York, is Dr. Ted Barnett, also known as Dr. Veggie. He's the president and board chair of Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute, which he founded in 2015. He received his undergraduate degree in 1976 from Yale and his medical degree in 1980 from Tufts, where he also completed his diagnostic imaging residency and became board certified in 1984. 11 years later, in 1995, he became one of the first physicians board certified in vascular and interventional radiology after passing the inaugural examination given by the American Board of Radiology. And then 22 years later, in 2017, he became one of the first 204 physicians board certified in lifestyle medicine after passing the inaugural examination of the American Board of Lifestyle Medicine. Dr. Ted Barnett, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
That is a beautiful setting you've got there. Do you practice medicine from your gazebo?
I wish I could. This is my home office, so it's right. It's not too far from our house. It's 30 feet from the house, and the good thing about it is it has a great Wi-Fi connection. So that's all I need.
Oh, very good.
I spend about three-fourths of my time out here when I can, when the weather's okay. So it's glassed in. So I can only be out here in the morning right now because it's going to get hot today. But I'm out here in the winter, got a little heater, and so yeah, it's great.
Yeah, we've got a heat wave going on across the country.
Yeah.
Partially because people eat too much meat.
Exactly. Glenn, where are you located? I'm sorry.
I am located in the Midwest.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. So you're getting the same heat. You're getting the same heat wave.
Getting the same heat wave.
Mm-hmm.
So you became vegan was it 1991?
Yeah, that's right.
I became vegan in 1992.
Okay, maybe we're related.
I had heard that there was a doctor in Rochester who went vegan, and I said, that's good enough for me. Okay. I'm joining the team. So tell us what motivated you back in 1991 to make that big change?
Well, interesting question. So I've been an environmentalist all my life. I grew up in a very environmentally aware household. My parents took me outdoors all the time. We were always out on Long Island Sound, and I lived in Connecticut. Boating. Back then, I used to fish a lot before I became more enlightened, and clamming and crabbing and oystering and all that stuff that you could do, and basically living off the land outdoors. So I became very much felt like I was part of the natural world. We had a big garden. And we used to go up in the summers. We go to a family farm in New Hampshire, I spent a lot of time hiking, and I became a member of the Sierra Club probably when I was 18 years old, and kind of have always been a member. But I always thought, I'm an environmentalist, and my wife and I got married in 1986, and we moved to Rush, New York, which is a little town south of Rochester, which is where I am right now. And, we started to raise a family. We had 2 little girls. And then she became interested in becoming vegan or vegetarian for animal rights reasons. She got a mailing from PETA that showed a down cow. and was very sort of motivated by that. And we began discussing it. And I said, well, the more I read about it, it seems like, well, if you're going to be an environmentalist, you got to give up eating animal products because clearly that's one of the major drivers behind climate change. And even then, it was pretty obvious we were headed for a disaster with climate change. And so I thought, well, you know, let's give it a try. You know, like any good parents, let's perform an experiment on our children. Let's,
Yes,
right?
all parents
Exactly.
should do that.
Exactly.
Now,
Let's
now,
become,
how old were your children at the time?
so we had two little girls who were toddlers. I think they were maybe, let's see, we became, one was born in 87 and one was born in 89. So one was 2 and one was almost 5. No, and one was 4. So 2 and 4. Um, and Nathaniel hadn't been born yet. He wasn't born until 1992. So I said, let's perform an experiment on our children. Let's become vegan. And maybe someday this will be important because people will say, well, you know, is it even possible to raise kids on a vegan diet? And I said, well, let's find out. At the time, I was quite convinced it was safe because the more studying I did about what we knew about veganism and living on a plant-based diet, the more I realized that this is not only safe, but it's way healthier than what people have been eating. And you know, I set the bar really low. I
Mhm.
said, okay, it just has to be as safe as the diet we're eating now. So that was pretty easy to convince myself. And even back then, there were what I would consider pioneers, like Dr. Michael Clapper, who had already published books on raising children, and my wife was aware of those. And you know, there was and we got the books from you know, that he wrote. We also McDougall, who's probably been doing this from a health standpoint longer than anybody. He had, you know, several bestsellers at that point. And then of course John Robbins published on you know, Diet for a New America, which I believe came out in the 80s. You know, Dr. Neil Barnett had founded the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, I believe in 86, somewhere around then. So it seemed to us that there were already pioneers who had kind of demonstrated that this was safe. Um, and then I think the thing that finally pushed me over was reading Reversing Heart Disease by Dean Ornish, which he published in 1990. And in there, he makes the statement that how it's extremely difficult to get funding for anything to do with lifestyle medicine because there's no money in it. If you demonstrate that a lifestyle medicine intervention is the best treatment of all, no one's going to benefit. There's no money involved with that. So that's when
Mhm.
I say I had my sloping forehead moment. I went, ah, aha, I get it. I get it. So not only did it feel like this was a really healthy thing for us to do for ourselves, for the planet, but also it felt like it was an act of defiance, right? Here we're gonna say, okay, you know, the system doesn't want me to do this, but we're gonna do it anyway. And it wasn't that hard for me because in a way, you know, I make my living in medicine through the high tech stuff, right? So I call myself the high tech doctor with low tech solutions. So that, you know, I had an income stream, right? It kind of felt like being Robin Hood. You know, I can
Mhm.
take money out of the system and then I can use that to spend to help put the system out of business, which of course hasn't happened. But anyway, that's kind of the background.
So it's interesting that though you're a medical doctor,
Mm,
the original impetus was from your wife on moral grounds about the animals,
right,
and then the second one was the environment,
right.
and then you came to the medical reason in third place. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But then of course, you know, we realized that well, to get people's attention, you need to kind of focus on the health and the medical aspects of it,
Right,
because that's what people are most interested in.
right. And once you looked into the medical side of it,
Hmm.
did you did it take long before you said, not only is this safe, this is better?
No, it was that happened all at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, before we made that decision in 1991. I think a lot of that had to do with reading Dean Ornish's materials. You know,
Uh-huh.
the fact that there was a randomized control trial
Uh-huh.
showing that you could actually open up arteries. And now I'm an interventional radiologist, so I actually do angiograms and I do angioplasties. And
Uh-huh.
it never occurred to me that plaques could actually open up
Uh-huh.
based on, you know, lifestyle and diet changes. But he demonstrated that in a randomized
Right.
controlled trial.
Well, speaking of Dr. Dean Ornish, let me try
Yeah.
to ask a question very delicately.
Uh-huh.
I don't know the man. I'm guessing you do.
Uh-huh.
And he has definitely been a great pioneer in our movement to get people to eat more plants and to, move away from the meat-based diet. He has saved countless lives with
Mm-hmm.
his research and his advocacy for a plant-based diet. But there's one thing that I've always had in the back of my mind, I never quite got. In his program, he allows for, I believe, some non-fat milk, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny bits of animal-based foods,
And egg whites.
egg whites, yeah. And I've always wondered, and let me know if you can share any insight on this. I've always wondered, does Dr. Ornish really believe that the egg whites and the non-dairy milk are good for you, or does he just have to do that in order to get Medicare funding, get approved, get his program approved? What do you have any insight into that?
Well, first of all, that was the way the original study was done back in the late 80s with a very low fat diet. So it was basically
Mhm.
10% calories from fat. And if you're using non-fat dairy, there's no basically zero fat in that. And if you're using
Mhm.
egg whites, there's no fat in that. So if you're focusing on the fat and also getting in lots of plants, then it kind of makes sense. Now that was how he did it back then. He's, I believe, very much come around so that that's not part of what he recommends anymore.
Aha,
But
very good.
okay, yeah, and he's absolutely understands the environmental implications, and I don't think it took him that long to switch over. And as all of us, anybody who's sort of thinking about this realizes that we got to get away from animal products, and he's
Right.
certainly in that camp.
So you were really one of the pioneers because it was back in the early 90s before there were a lot of plant-based physicians.
Hmm.
Um, how would you describe the evolution of your colleagues? Are more and more coming along? Do you sense that this is a movement with growing momentum? Um, tell us about that.
Wow, that's a great question. The answer is yes. I think colleagues are moving in the right direction. Um, you know, the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, which got its start in the early 2000s, like 2004, 2005, somewhere around there. I joined it in 2010, actually, at the recommendation of my friend Michael Greger, who I've known for a long, long time, since the early 90s, and or the mid 90s. Anyway, he said, Ted, you should join the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. When I joined around 2010, we had 130 members. There's now about 11,000 members. So it's doing one of these things.
Good.
And many, many doctors and other healthcare professionals have begun to recognize the importance of lifestyle medicine and plant-based diet. Because I would say that of the 6 official pillars of lifestyle medicine, nutrition is probably the most important. It's the one that's least controversial. I mean, sorry, most controversial, I
Yeah.
should say, right? Everybody agrees we need to get more sleep. Everyone agrees we need to get our stress under control and that we shouldn't smoke or drink. Everybody agrees we need to have lots of more friends and we should exercise. But what's the perfect diet? Well, is it keto? Is it paleo? Is it whole food plant-based? We think we know the only one that's been demonstrated in randomized controlled trials to, reverse the number one killer of Americans, namely heart disease, is the whole food plant-based diet. But as far as other doctors coming around, I've definitely seen it from the beginning. You know, uh, Early in my career, I was the head of radiology at a small hospital in the Finger Lakes called F.F. Thompson Hospital in Canandaigua. And back then, radiologists, before everything was on computer, before everything was on the PAC systems, we had films. We had actual X-rays. You remember those? And
Yeah.
they were up on a view box, and there was only one copy in the hospital. You couldn't like go to the nursing station and pull up the X-ray. You actually go to the radiologist's office and look at it. So there'd be radiology rounds in the morning, in quotes. People would come to my office and they'd want to go over films on their patients. And then, of course, then they would look in my lunchbox.
Really?
Right. And they say, what is it today, Ted? Because, what crazy food has your wife sent you in with today? And it would be, so I would,
Did you develop a reputation as the quirky doctor on this weird diet?
absolutely, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, just to jump forward a little bit, our medical director for Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute, who just recently, we've been friends for a long time, but she just recently has got the official title as medical director, is Dr. Carrie Graff, who up until about a year ago was working as a family practice doc for Rochester Regional Health System in Rochester. And but back in the somewhere around I don't know, 2000, 2005, something like that, she actually was a newly minted family practice doctor. And the way she tells the story is, she ran into that, Dr. Barnett was this crazy tree hugging guy. I thought he was nuts. I didn't believe any of this stuff. And then she developed her own medical conditions, insulin resistance, pre-diabetes. She was overweight. She had had multiple surgeries for, and I can talk about this because she talks about it too, multiple operations for endometriosis. And then she decided, I forget what year it was, 2014, something like that. She finally said, I'm going to try this. And all of her symptoms and conditions resolved. So she's, a physician who's been through this herself and now is, a true believer, not because it's a belief system, but because it's evidence-based, right?
Yeah.
And, there's no better way to run a test than on yourself, right? And we do it all the time. People always talk. So anyway, she's a really good example of someone who made that change. I also ran the grand rounds at that hospital. So every week we'd have, like, I forget, I think it was Monday morning at 7 a.m. We would have grand rounds in our little conference room, and I got to choose the speaker. So, and frequently that speaker was me. And so I actually gave the first talk ever on prions, the
Oh,
cause of,
really?
right, BSE, bovine spongiform encephalopathy. And I predicted, who was it? Stanley Prusiner, I think, is the guy who
Right.
discovered prions. I predicted that he would get a Nobel Prize, and then he
You
did.
he
Yeah,
did.
yeah, because his idea was really crazy. What? A pro
Folded proteins,
exactly.
misfolded proteins.
How is that going to cause a disease, right? And how's it going to
Right.
be infectious?
Right.
So, but it turned out to be. So anyway, things in medicine have really evolved. Now the problem is, there's still financially, that's not where the money is. So um, if your kid goes into medicine and you want them to have a comfortable life, probably not going to recommend that they go into lifestyle medicine because um, it's just really hard to make a living with that, even though it's the most powerful thing we can do for people. If your kid says, Dad, I'm thinking about becoming a bariatric surgeon, or maybe I'll become a lifestyle medicine doctor. What do you think? And you say, well, do you want to be able to afford a house and a car or not? Right?
Um, Let me challenge you a little bit on that.
Yeah.
If you're a general internist
Yes.
and you make a decent salary as a general
Right.
internist,
Yeah.
whether you're working at Kaiser or in some private practice,
Yeah.
um, can't you practice lifestyle medicine as a general internist and make a pretty good upper middle class salary?
I think you can if you have the right help in your office. And there are definitely doctors around the country who are doing that. You know, uh, who have worked out ways of having health coaches on their team,
Mhm.
um, and nursing staff and specially trained staff who can work with the patients. And it involves really using what's called health coaching, because the problem is if you really want to do it yourself, you got to spend an hour with the patient.
Mhm.
Well, that's not how you keep your office running,
Right.
right? Because you're not going to make enough money to keep the lights on if you do that.
Right.
Now, there is a way to do that through what's called shared medical appointments, or SMAs, where interestingly enough, the payers don't care how many people are in your office or in your right when you're examining room
Uh-huh.
when you're talking to them. So you can bill if you have 10 people in your room for an hour, you can bill for all of them. And then it becomes financially feasible. And you can't. So that's a way to do it. I was going to say, you can't blame people for um, being cautious about this because they got kids they want to put through college, right?
Right.
And you can always, the human brain is a rationalizing organ, right? We can always rationalize, well, I'm doing this because, it is helping somebody, right, to do bariatric surgery or put somebody on Ozempic, uh, right? But it's not, in the long run, it's not the best for our individual patients or for the society at large.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my first career was as a playwright.
Oh, really?
So
I didn't know that.
yeah, so it gets hard for me to feel that economic sympathy for doctors who are
Right.
practicing lifestyle medicine because that's far better for your pocketbook than being a playwright, I can
I'm
tell you
sure. I'm sure. Well, unless you hit it big, right?
Yeah. Well, there's an old saying, you can't make a living as a playwright, you could only make a killing.
Ah, okay. Very good.
You
Okay.
can't get a
Yeah.
play done, but if you get Hamilton done on Broadway,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Sure.
know, you
Sure.
can buy a rocket ship. Um, so you are an interventional radiologist. Did I
Right.
get that right?
That's correct.
That was a field I wasn't even familiar with because I always
Hmm.
thought of radiologists as people who do and read scans. But interventional means that you not only do and read the scans, you then take action upon them.
Hmm.
So, and that was a fairly new field when you went into it, is that right?
Well, the field kind of had existed for a while. I mean, the angiography has existed, and there are people doing interventional things with no, basically interventional radiology is image-guided procedures. So, you want to get a catheter into an artery, you use the fluoroscopy room in your radiology department to guide the catheter and get it to where you want to go. So that's the radiology part of it is using the image guided. It didn't really become a formal specialty until the boards were created in 1995, which is when I took the first boards in that. It was an inaugural boards, and um, it uh, it was an interesting exam. I took my first radiology boards in 1984, right as I was finishing my residency at Tufts in Boston, and then I actually spent a couple of years traveling. I decided to do what's called locum tenens, which is like Kelly Girls for radiology. I've covered practices all over the country, and actually I even spent a month working at Hadassah Hospital in Israel, and I supported my travel habit. So I worked half time and I traveled around the world a couple of times. So the original boards were in 1984. Came to Rochester in 1986 when we got married, and started practicing interventional radiology here, just as kind of a sideline. I mean, I was running a couple of little radiology departments in the Finger Lakes, plus also working at a big major teaching hospital in Rochester, New York, at the time. I'm part of a very large group that we used to have 7 hospitals. We've since become all outpatient, which is because we all got older and couldn't take call anymore.
Mhm.
But So interventional radiology is basically doing things with image guidance. And we're not the only ones who do things with image guidance. Interventional cardiologists obviously use the same
Right.
equipment. And there's even interventional nephrologists who poke kidneys under ultrasound or whatever, but it's kind of mostly sort of developed in the radiology world. So now I do images, procedures under most of my procedures now are done with ultrasound guidance, where I actually do a lot of biopsies and a few drainages now and then. Yeah, and then and under CT scanning as well. And all those technologies have evolved. I mean, I remember it used to be CT scanning was incredibly slow, and you kind of had to advance your needle kind of on faith, and then have them take a film, a picture, and then check the picture. But now there's real-time CT where you can actually be watching on the screen as you're doing things. So it's exciting. I love the technology. But being fascinated by the technology doesn't mean that it's the best thing you can do for people's health, right?
Right.
All right, if you've ever wanted to show off your plant-based lifestyle and do it in style, here's your chance. We have some of the most amazing t-shirts, hats, accessories, coffee mugs, and more at shop.realmeneatplants.com. We have statement t-shirts that will bring a smile to everyone's face. I love the I want tofu tonight tee. Plus, we have podcast tees, Real Women Eat Plants gear, Real Kids Eat Plants, and Real People Eat Plants, just in case men, women, and kids didn't cover it all. Yeah, we love you and love that you want to show off that healthy lifestyle of yours. Again, check out our high-quality gear at shop.realmeneatplants.com and enjoy.
Say there's a patient who has been advised to get an angioplasty.
Yes.
Now, we know they'd probably be far, far better off going on a Whole Foods low-fat plant-based diet than getting an angioplasty.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe in a certain circumstance, the angioplasty is necessary, or they're refusing to go on a healthy diet. So they might have a choice of going to an interventional cardiologist
Mm-hmm.
or an interventional radiologist. Would there be any difference?
Oh, yeah, there definitely would be. So the hearts have basically all gone to the cardiologists. So I don't really know. Okay. There's really no interventional radiologists that I know of who are doing hearts now.
But you used to do that, right?
Well, I never did hearts.
Oh,
Okay. The original angioplasties of the heart were actually developed by radiologists, but this is a long time ago, maybe in the 80s, really, or in the 90s, maybe is probably. But it's so specialized, and the cardiologists have gotten really, really good at that, and I would definitely defer to them for that kind of a procedure. Now, there are other parts of the body, like the brain, that is really interventional radiology. So there's neuroradiologists and interventional neuroradiologists who do brains, but and carotid arteries in the neck. But yeah, so it would be mainly cardiology.
so are there some procedures that the consumer has a choice between going to an interventional radiologist or a brain surgeon or some, do they sometimes have to make a choice?
Oh, what an interesting question. I don't think the patient ever really is aware of that choice.
Okay.
Because it's going to be kind of traditional. So the hospital, if you are at a hospital and you need to have your brain aneurysm fixed, you're not going to, they're just going to send you to the place in the hospital where the specialist does that. And you're not going to even know whether they're an interventional radiologist or a neurosurgeon, or whoever is doing that particular procedure in that hospital. So I don't think you're going to, I mean, if you're doing things as an outpatient, like getting your veins, if you have varicose veins and you're getting them fixed, that could be a vascular surgeon, that could be a radiologist. So, or you're having you have an ischemic foot, then and that might be a choice between an interventional radiologist or a vascular surgeon, where they're going to revascularize your leg. But it was interesting. You asked earlier about whether you should go, the diet versus whether you should have the angioplasty. And that's a really tough question. First of all, it's not really just an angioplasty anymore. It almost always includes a stent. So you have the angioplasty and they leave a little metal stent behind, which is kind of like the rip wrap that holds up, a stream from basically getting blocked again. When people ask me that question, I basically recommend that they talk to a cardiologist who I know is very, very sympathetic to the plant-based treatment. Right. Because I think they're the ones who are most aware of what the best choice is in those situations. Most cardiologists are not, I don't think, are not proponents of a plant-based diet, in my experience.
Right.
So,
and we all know that there are some drawbacks to stents.
There are. There's some great things about stents, which is like you feel better pretty much right away. Yeah. Which, right? I mean, because you get that instant, the artery is now open. Now the drawbacks to the stents are they fill in again, they get clogged. Right. So I think that's you got to take that one case at a time. Yeah.
Now you have partners in your practice. Have they moved along towards the whole food plant-based diet?
Yeah, they have actually. Oh, really? So not as many as I would like, but we hold our professional PC meetings usually once every month or two, And the very last one we had, which was just 3 or 4 days ago on Monday, was I got to order the food.
Uh-huh.
Well, actually, I didn't order I got to recommend the source of the food, the caterer. So I didn't actually make the choices, but we ordered from Sweet Pea Plant-based, which is a local, Rochester local organization that provided healthy, low-fat vegan food. And it was I got mixed reviews. And initially the reviews were really negative from the one person who had actually ordered them, said, Ted, don't get used to this. Okay. But then as other people walked in and said, oh, this is great, I love this. The person who initially was negative was going, really? Everybody likes this? So so that felt really good. That felt really good. And look, doctors get sick too, right? So they need to eat a healthy diet. And,
Right.
one by one, they come to me and say, what can I do? And so it's great. So we're definitely, I would say my radiology group is probably moving relatively slow compared to the other um, doctors I work with and have influence, but we're getting there for sure.
Well, you were smart enough to go vegan when you were a young man,
Mm.
so probably you didn't feel any health changes, but let me ask, did you?
Well, people ask me that. It's a really interesting question. I didn't really feel much different as you would guess. I was in pretty good shape at the time. I still run every morning, or every day anyway. And I can run an 8-minute mile or less. So
Wow.
and I do that occasionally just to prove to myself. I usually go out and run 8.5s or 9s. But I run basically I run a 5K every day. Uh,
Wow.
and well, I've been running 3 miles a day for years, and then I realized that if I actually run 3.1 miles, my Apple Watch says, "Congratulations, you just ran a 5K." So I thought, you know what? For the extra tenth of a mile, I can get this extra bonus encouragement from my watch. And
It's
so
it's always good to be on good terms with your watch. So
exactly, I know. Yeah, you don't want to be on bad terms with your watch.
yeah.
So.
So you
But
run every day. Wow.
I run every day. I'm that I've got the aerobic exercise thing down to a science. I do, but I'm still working. I'm still working on the resistance training. I find that harder to get into my routine, but I do that at least twice a week. So
Okay.
yeah.
Now, has your diet evolved much since you became a vegan? In my case, um, first I became a vegan about a year after you,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was eating a lot of vegan fake meats, things like that.
Right.
And I I used to cook in olive oil,
Mm-hmm.
and over time, gee, it must have taken me, I don't know, 15 years of being a vegan or more before I gave up the oil,
Yeah.
and gave up more and more of the processed foods. How about you? Did your vegan diet evolve over time?
It did. Before I answer that, can I interview you?
Sure.
Okay. Well, so what was
Welcome to the Ted Barnett Show, ladies and gentlemen. Here we go. Your guest today is me.
So what motivated you, and where were your sources of recipes, and how did where did you find out how to eat?
Yeah. What motivated me was that when I was 16, two of my uncles died. My mother's two brothers died of heart attacks. One was 49, one was mid 50s.
Hmm.
My mother, who was maybe only 10 pounds overweight, she got angina, had trouble walking up a short flight of stairs without chest pain.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew my grandparents. They were dead of mostly of heart attacks, in one case cancer, before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So there was so much heart disease in my family
Mm.
that I figured I'll be middle aged at 25.
Mm.
So I had to do something. And I heard Dick Gregory talking about being a vegetarian,
Mm.
and I decided to go vegetarian at the age of 17. Um, and then in my early to mid 30s, I started getting chest pains. Now, I
Really?
was eating cheese, I was eating cheese because I had an obese aunt and uncle who were so alarmed when I went vegetarian at age 17. They said, "Where will you get your protein?" And I said, I guess from cheese. So I would eat cream cheese, I would eat cheddar cheese, I would eat pizza with mozzarella. And when I was about 34 or so, I started getting these weird chest pains. I've never had them explained to me. Let's see if you, doctor, can explain them. But it felt like an electric shock. I
Mm.
would just be maybe walking. I noticed a few times it happened when I was sipping alcohol, sipping wine. I would feel like an electric shock in my heart and I would almost drop to the ground.
Mm.
Happened about a dozen times.
Mm.
And a normal person would go to a cardiologist, but that's not me. So I said to myself, let's see. It's so unfair. I'm a vegetarian and I'm getting these heart pains. I'm not eating meat. I'm not getting that saturated fat and cholesterol. Oh yeah, that pizza, that mozzarella. What is it? That's saturated fat and cholesterol. I'm getting
Mm.
liquid meat.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave up the cheese, went vegan when I was about 35, 36,
Mm-hmm.
and I never had that experience in my heart again.
Mm.
No problem since then. So if there's one thing I regret, it's eating cheese for after becoming a vegetarian. I should have gone
Right.
vegan.
Yeah.
Um, but
So you never
that
had
was what motivated me was health.
right. So you never had a stress test or
No.
an imaging study. So we don't know that the chest pain was caused by coronary artery, but you got better. So
But I got better. And let me tell you this, and this is, not easy to say to someone who earns his living doing tests, but I
mhm.
don't like tests. I don't like
Don't
to do
blame you.
them. And right now, um, well, I'll go back a little bit in the story. A year and a half ago, I sneezed my way into a hernia,
Okay.
a right side. Yeah, am I pronouncing it right? Inguinal hernia.
Yep.
So the whole food plant-based diet protects you from a lot of things, does
Right.
not protect you from sneezing your way into a hernia.
Right.
It's of no use for that at all.
Right.
So I had to prove to the surgeon that my heart was okay
Mm.
before the surgery. Had an EKG and they found that my I don't know, they called it a bundle block thing.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Bundle branch
so
block. Yeah.
so I had to then have an ultrasound of the heart.
Mm.
And I wanted the hernia surgery, so I reluctantly did it. I didn't want
Mm.
to do it, and the reason I didn't want to do it
Mm.
was, what if they tell me, oh, you've got a valve that's a little bit leaky. Don't worry, you don't have to have heart surgery. You just have to come in every 6 months and we have to look at it. And I didn't want to live with that stress. I
Mm.
don't want to know if there's anything wrong. I actually spoke at the time to a retired cardiologist in my town.
Mm.
And he said to me, and I almost killed him, Ted. I was scared I killed him
Mm.
because he said to me, Glenn, if you have heart disease, don't you want to know about it? And I said, of course not. And he said, "Ah!" And I thought I'd killed him.
Uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
that's the way I feel. I feel that I'm on a whole food, low fat, oil free, plant
Yeah.
based diet. That's the best I could do. If I have any
Right.
problems, I don't want to know about it. But I
Interesting. Yeah.
reluctantly did the ultrasound, and the guy said my heart is fantastic. I got an
Right.
A plus.
Okay.
Went to the best hernia surgeon in America, who I'm going to interview next week,
Okay.
and he did a great job. I never had any pain.
Huh.
Would you think that's possible? I never had to take an aspirin.
That's great.
They were, they warned me, oh, if you're going to have open surgery, it's going to be painful.
Uh-huh.
Never had to take an aspirin, maybe because there's low inflammation in my body.
Right. So you
Anyway,
had, yeah.
now
Yeah.
I must have coughed my way into a left side inguinal hernia.
Yeah.
So now I'm thinking of doing it again, but they first have to prove it's there, and I did an ultrasound, and they couldn't detect it. It's called an occult hernia.
Yeah.
They couldn't detect it, so they asked me to do a CAT scan.
Uh-huh.
I said no.
Huh.
I'm not doing a CAT scan because I don't, they're going to tell me they found something.
Uh-huh.
You know, you get a CAT scan, they say, oh, they found a little dark spot over here. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to know. So tell me, what do you think of a patient who doesn't want to know if
Right.
there's
Well,
anything wrong?
I just want you to know, Glenn, that we already know about you because you are on a list of patients who refuse to have tests.
Uh-huh.
All the, it's available to all radiology groups for a price. So we already know about you.
Okay.
Uh, well, it depends how symptomatic your
Yeah,
hernia.
that's it. I mean, it's not like I'm not having any pain. I don't have a problem. I can see that I have a left side inguinal hernia. And what else could it be? Well, if it's a swollen lymph gland, it would have to be a reducible one, because it's reducible.
Well, so you you can see this hernia?
Oh yeah,
Oh,
that's
well
how I
then,
know I have it. I don't feel it.
then the ultrasound is wrong. Um, and have you been examined by that same surgeon who did your original?
No, but a different surgeon. He said
And
that he thought it was a hernia, but he couldn't. He feels for what he calls the hole from the abdominal wall. He said he couldn't feel it, so get an ultrasound. Got the ultrasound. They said we couldn't detect anything, and apparently there are hernias that aren't detected by ultrasound.
when you had your ultrasound, were you lying down or did they have you stand up?
I think I was. I think I was sitting down.
No, it wouldn't have been sitting. It would have either been
Well,
lying
so maybe
down.
it was lying down then.
Yeah, because what you want to do is you want the ultrasound technologist to be looking at you while you're standing up.
Oh, really? I don't think I was standing up.
Yeah, because it sounds like if you can see the thing and you use the term reducible, what you can push it
Yeah.
back in, right?
Well, just when I go to sleep at night, I get up in the morning, it's not there. And then a few minutes later, it's there.
Sounds like a
Ladies and
hernia.
gentlemen,
Yeah.
you're learning more than you ever wanted to know
Yeah.
about my left side inguinal hernia. We're making podcast history today.
So I think we could go further and make even more podcasts. Why don't you take off your clothes and put them in, and we'll examine you right now with that.
Yeah. See, we
So
can do a telemed visit right
yeah,
now.
exactly. Right, exactly. So anyway, well, the reason we switched to interviewing you is you asked me if my diet had changed since
Right.
1991. And the truth is, it obviously has changed. We all have, but you remember my reason for making the switch was because I read the work of Dr. Dean Ornish,
Right.
right? So, and that was a 10% calories from fat diet. So, very much was about having low fat. Now, I have to admit, at the time, I was most interested in the fat content of things. Now, we were also vegan for ethical reasons and environmental reasons, which are the same basically. So we weren't using egg whites or non-fat dairy, but I don't think we were too afraid of processed food,
Mhm.
right? So, the veggie burgers and things like that and the not dogs. So
And the oil.
we weren't using oil
Okay.
because oil is pure fat.
Right. Right. But if it
So
would, usually the processed foods have some canola oil or something in them.
they do, but if you're only looking at percentages,
Mhm.
then even a little, you can have oil in food. So it
Right.
was more about the percentages. So for
Okay.
the processed food, if it's a low percentage of calories from fat, like Snackwell cookies,
Mhm.
right? Right, which is basically pure junk, but they meet the letter of the law by being very low in fat.
Right.
So, but not healthy, which is why early on there were a lot of cardiologists who said, no, this is not a healthy diet because I have patients going on this 10% calories from fat diet and their cholesterol is coming down, but their triglycerides are going through the roof. And the triglycerides are going up because they're eating all this processed carbohydrate. So I would say that our diet has improved over the years because we're less interested in being very low fat, although we are low fat, very interested in being very low fat and more interested in the ratio of processed to unprocessed. So I think people always ask about like, what percentage of calories should I get from protein, carbohydrate, and fat? And, we used to say, you come up with these numbers like, 60, 20, 20, 10, 10, 80, whatever you want. You come up with your numbers. But truthfully, I don't think those numbers matter nearly as much as the percentage of your calories that come from animal products versus plant products. And the answer there is it should be basically zero animal products
Right.
and all plant products, and also then the ratio of processed versus unprocessed. And
Right.
I think, we all eat a little processed food. It's pretty hard not to because, condiments are processed, right? But condiments are fine. So, then that's the ratio of processed to unprocessed. If you're getting almost all of your calories from unprocessed whole plant foods, then, you're on the best diet there is.
Right.
I'd say we've moved more in that direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So tell us about the Rochester Lifestyle Medicine organization that you
Yeah.
founded, right?
Yeah. So Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute, we started it back in 2015. I was, I'm still working as a radiologist. I was working as a radiologist then, but I decided that, in my spare time, even though we had 3 kids, I guess the kids were kind of out of the house by then.
And the kids all stayed vegan, right? That
They did.
experiment
That's
worked?
right. Exactly. And our youngest, our son Nate, who is semi-professional musician, also a real estate agent, he has a Grammy.
How did
So,
he get a Grammy? Was it for the
so
real estate or the music?
Well, good question. It comes in really handy though when you're advertising as a real estate agent, right? Say,
Yeah.
Nate Barnett, Grammy Award-winning real estate agent. So, anyway, he is part of a professional choir in
Ah,
Philadelphia
okay.
called The Crossing, and their
Okay.
last album got a Grammy.
Okay.
Yeah, so he has 1/24th of a Grammy, I guess, if you
All
want to look
right.
at it. But
More
and
than I have.
yeah, exactly. And he runs a nonprofit called the Uncommon Music Festival that puts on a music festival in Sitka, Alaska every summer. And
I often go to Alaska
yeah,
for music
okay.
festival.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, the kids and our oldest is now 37, Rebecca and Elizabeth, they're all vegan. So we're really proud of that. They've all done really, really well. But we started Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute to run a program called CHIP, the Complete Health Improvement Program, which was started by a man called Hans Deal from the Loma Linda. I don't know if you've heard of him. Loma
Yes,
Linda,
I knew Hans, the
you know,
late
yeah.
great Hans Deal.
Yeah, exactly. So we got, he and I got to be relatively close. We were one of the biggest chip providers in the country. We had more chip kits, I think, than anybody. We in our that we had to store for quite a while. But anyway, so we started running chip programs in our office in Rochester. We actually started a medical practice so that we could document how people were doing. I said, look, if we're going to do this, we got to get data. And the best way to get data is to have them actually be our patients. So we would do finger sticks on our patients before and after they would do our programs. I'll kind of shorten this a little bit, but in 2018, we decided to start what we call the 15-day Whole Food Plant-based Jumpstart, which we basically created ourselves. And we used a lot of what we had learned by running CHIP programs. The problem with CHIP is that it's a minimum of 6 weeks, but it's usually more like 10 to 12 or even 18 weeks, depending on how often you do it every week, how often you meet. And I tell people that CHIP is like getting a kid into a bathtub. You can't get them in, but then you can't get them out, right? They love it when they do it, but it's very hard to get people to sign up for a program that's that long. And we've had great luck with our 15-day Whole Food Plant-based Jumpstart, which we tell people, look, you're a grown-up. You can do anything for 2 weeks. Just try this, and we'll get your finger stick lab results on day 1, and then we'll get your finger stick lab results on day 15, and we'll show you like how amazing it is, how much your body wants to heal, because you'll see these results, dramatic results, very quickly. And most doctors are not aware of how quickly these labs can change. I certainly wasn't. And the first time we did it, I thought, gosh, I hope this works, because we've just
Yeah.
got all these, we just brought 25 people into our office, and then we started to see just, falling off out of our chairs, people whose cholesterol dropped 150 points in 2 weeks from 299
Wow.
to 149. One of
Wow.
our very first patients who came to us in 2018 when we started doing it, the 2-week program, the Jumpstart, he was a newly diagnosed a man with diabetes, and his hemoglobin A1C was 13.6, which means his average blood sugar for the last 90 days was 350. He had just been newly diagnosed. His doctors were all screaming, "You got to go on medication." He came to us and said, "Well, I don't want to go on medication. What do you think?" I said, "Well, your blood sugar has been 350 for 3 months now. Probably could, if this doesn't work, another 2 weeks is probably not going to kill you. So let's give it a shot." Right? So he does the 15-day Whole Food Plant-based Jumpstart. His blood sugar normalizes basically immediately, and within 3 months, his hemoglobin A1C was down to 6.0. So, but from Labor Day to Christmas, it goes from 13.6 to 6.0. A few months later, it was down to 5.5. It's now completely normal. If he goes to the doctor now, they would never diagnose diabetes in him because he doesn't have it anymore. So that really gave us confidence to continue with this mission, which of course doesn't make any money. So my wife and I are full-time volunteers. We do have very generous donors. And if there's anybody out there who wants to be another generous donor, we're happy to have you join the cause. I don't make any money off of it. I'm really clear when I ask for donations that it's not coming to me at all. But we do have a staff, and we do, have a significant budget. That we've now, when the pandemic hit in 2020, we said we can't bring 24 people into our office every month now as a new cohort because it's not safe. COVID's going around.
Right.
So we did a very quick pivot. We said, let's see if we can do this remotely. So we switched to Zoom. We switched to the Google Classroom for our basically for our forum, away from Facebook groups, because at that time about a third of people wouldn't do Facebook, and now it's more than half won't do Facebook anyway. So we switched over to online video, online storage of our information, and then and now we actually use a whole nother learning management system, which is built into our new community website, which is called paleblue.community. I don't know if you're familiar with that, and I'll talk more about that in a minute if I could. But when we switched, the only thing that we couldn't do is we couldn't get people's finger sticks, right? You can't do finger sticks over video. So we had to count on people to go to get their doctors to order the test before they started and to order it again afterwards. So it's a little more challenging to actually do scientific studies because we don't have the control over the patients we used to, but we've seen a lot more people. We've now reached almost 2,500 people in 44 states and 9 countries. We're actually international now, which, at the time we were doing this locally in Rochester, we were talking about figuring out how are we going to get this to other doctors around the country. We've proved that it works, but boy, it's going to be really challenging to get this out there. If we really want to move the needle on the system, you need something really scalable. So in that way, the pandemic was a silver lining for us because we've built this totally scalable system. There's about 300 doctors around the country who have now referred patients to us at one time or another. We are building that up now by reaching out to doctors everywhere. Really for us now, it's about marketing. We've built the system, and we find that a certain percentage of people who hear about us sign up for the program, and a certain percentage of doctors who hear about us refer us patients. So we just got to reach more people, which is so I do podcasts like this.
Is it possible to do a study when you have patients going to their own doctors to get their lab tests and then sending in the results?
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is compliance, right? So a lot of patients, we send them, excuse me. That was a reminder that I'm supposed to do push-ups now. I forgot to turn that on.
Can you do push-ups and answer my questions at the same time?
I think I'll do it later. Anyway, but maybe. What was the question? It was the study.
Yes.
Yeah. It's much more challenging because of compliance and getting people to fill out their surveys and send in their lab results. The way to do it is to actually get people to sign up at the beginning saying, yes, I agree that I will be part of a study and I agree that I will do all these things. Of course, that adds a little bit of bias, but because you're going to be selecting for patients who we know are going to be more compliant. But the thing is, it's all about compliance anyway, and it's all about.
Right.
And the thing to remember, we're always being held to a higher standard. It's really strange. People say, "Well, this lifestyle medicine program you have, like, what's your ROI? What's your return on investment? What's your compliance rate? How are people doing a year later?" Well, do people ask that question about medication for high blood pressure? Do they ask that for statins? No, they don't. The original studies were done, and we showed that if people actually took the pills, that yes, their cholesterol would come down and the risk of heart disease would be reduced. But we don't do that anymore. Now just doctors, here, take these pills. And
Right.
there's a significant percentage of people who stop taking their medication. I don't
Right.
know what that number is, but it's a significant
Right.
number. So we know that the going on a whole food plant-based diet has all these really positive side effects.
Right.
And you don't get that with medication. So
So, am I right in saying that broccoli has better side effects than statins?
exactly. Yeah, we actually have a poster. I wish I had it here. I'll send it to you. Maybe you can you put it in the program notes. It's a big we actually have a big banner when we go to conferences. It says, "Ask your doctor if eating a whole food plant-based diet is right for you." And it's a little broccoli guy with a smile. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it says, "Caution, side effects may include reduced risk of heart disease, reduced risk of stroke, improved
Right.
sexual function, less arthritis, all these other things." We hear this all the time. We have people coming to us who say they joined us because they want to get their cholesterol down and they want to lose weight. On day 5, when we have our first check-in, they say, "Gosh, I didn't realize that my joints were bothering me but I realize now, it used to take me forever to get out of bed in the morning. Now I jump out of bed, my joints feel fine. I didn't expect arthritis, resolution to be a part of this. I didn't
Mhm.
expect that my heartburn getting better would be part of this." And they're
Mhm.
finding all these positive side effects.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing, and it's a little hard to believe almost
Hmm.
that cholesterol, we've all seen it in your case in patients, in my case in friends and people
Hmm.
I've given my amateur medical advice to.
Uh,
The cholesterol plummets.
right.
I mean, in 2, 3 weeks, it goes from 300 to, like you said, 150. Um, and the A1C and people lose weight. It's just so obvious that it works.
Hmm.
And yet, the overwhelming majority of conventional doctors and cardiologists don't even consider it. It's astonishing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. It is astonishing. And when you consider that, we're now up to $4.5 trillion in healthcare costs. And that's as of 2022. And the CDC even says that 90% of healthcare costs can be attributable to chronic disease and mental health issues. And actually, about 85% of this is just chronic disease. So diabetes, heart disease,
Right.
and almost all of that is avoidable and reversible with a whole food plant-based diet.
And speaking of the CDC and the
Yeah.
pandemic,
Yeah.
there was a study in BMJ that what they called a plant-based diet, whatever that is.
Right.
Not as good probably as the diet you and I practice.
Right.
A plant-based diet reduced severe COVID by 72%.
Hmm.
And the only side effects would be reduced chance of heart attacks
Right.
and weight loss and so forth. And I never heard Rochelle Walensky at the CDC or Surgeon General Murtha or Anthony Fauci
Hmm.
talk about that study,
Right.
recommend a whole food, low fat, plant-based diet. How can that be? How do they live with themselves if they don't even say the obvious, that that was a pandemic
Hmm.
that targeted the obese, it targeted people with type 2 diabetes, it targeted people eating the standard Western diet, and they had an opportunity there to say,
Yeah.
there's a pandemic. Let's tell everybody to stay home for a couple of weeks and eat right. But nobody said it.
Yeah. Wow. If we're gonna get into a political conversation here, let's have at it.
Well, without mentioning any political parties, but
Yeah.
let's just talk about, did they not have an opportunity to say,
Sure.
change your diet?
It would have been a great opportunity. I mean, but there was, of course, so much misinformation being peddled back then anyway. It's hard to know like where you would have started. But if you just look at look at the Farm Bill, for example,
Yeah.
and you understand how difficult it is for people in government to actually get away with saying the right thing. So, for
Right.
example, I live in New York State. We have, Senator Chuck Schumer is our senator. He's also, the
Senate Majority Leader.
Senate Majority Leader. Thank you. And I'm sure he knows about this diet. I'm sure he knows about it, right? He's got relatives who I'm sure are telling him that they got cured by going on a whole food plant-based diet. But do you think Senator Schumer is going to come out against dairy? This is a dairy state.
Yeah.
He's got to get reelected.
Right.
So, right? It's
Right.
natural
And
selection.
he can't even vote against the farm subsidies, which go to
Right.
overwhelmingly to animal agriculture.
Right. Which is why I really believe this has to be a grassroots movement. This has to come from the bottom up.
Right.
I'm
Right.
sure you've heard of the Overton window.
Yeah.
Familiar with that?
Yes.
We are the ones who have to move the Overton window to make it politically acceptable for politicians to be able to advocate for certain things.
Yeah.
It's our job. And that's why, people always say to me, well, have you been to the insurance companies? Have you been to the big healthcare systems? Blah, blah, blah. And I say, yeah. And I'm not giving up on them. But if I really want to move the needle, it's got to be individual physicians who ask their patients to do these things. And it's got to be individual citizens who are asking to do this themselves and are pushing their doctors in that direction. It's not going to come from the big systems. It can't.
Right.
They can't. They're not capable of it.
All right. Let me throw out an idea here.
All right.
How about if some organization, say Rochester Lifestyle Medicine, were to announce, we're going to do the study of studies. We're going to do the all-time great medical study.
Okay.
We're going to start it, January 1st, 2025. And we're going to
Okay.
enroll as many people as we can.
Yeah.
And we're going to get your blood work done in the first 3 weeks of January.
Mhm.
We're going to put you on this diet for 3 weeks, and then we're going to do your blood work again. And we're going to try to enroll as many people as we can. If we could get 100,000 people, great.
Wow.
And then you get all the publicity that you're going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
You get as many people as you can enrolled.
Okay.
And so you've now and now the public is watching because they
Right.
know this is going to happen. They've announced this.
Right.
People are signing up, and then when the results come out, it's headlines.
Yeah.
What do
Glenn,
you think?
you're a dreamer, Glenn.
I'm a dreamer.
You're a dreamer, and I'm all ears.
All right, that's my
So,
plan.
Let's when we're done with this podcast,
Yeah.
let's figure it out. Let's
Okay.
figure it out because you're absolutely right. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
And look, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, one of my favorite organizations,
Mhm.
they organize and they do things like that. In fact, they just started a little program for diabetes, where they're asking for people to join a study,
Uh-huh.
right? But people have to pay for it, which is
Yeah.
interesting. I actually do think you can't do it for free. People need to pay a little bit so they have some skin in the game. Otherwise, they sign up and then they don't do it.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I'm very happy to brainstorm with you about this. I mean,
Okay.
I've got the staff who we can make it work. For one thing, remember I mentioned to you earlier, we started this community platform called Pale Blue Dot Community.
Right. Tell us about the Pale Blue Dot community.
Okay, so first of all, are you familiar with the Pale Blue Dot, Carl Sagan?
Oh yeah.
Right. So
That the Earth is the pale blue dot.
the Earth is a pale blue dot because he was on the imaging team for the Voyager project and the Voyager 1, and I think it was around 1990 or 1994. Voyager was way out, like 6 billion kilometers at that point. I'd have to look it up exactly, but a lot by past Saturn for sure. So Uranus, Neptune, one of those. It was out there, and it was getting really far away, and we just got all these incredibly dramatic images of the outer planets. And Sagan said, "Can we just turn it around? before we lose touch with this spacecraft, let's just turn it around and take a picture of Earth. And Earth is less than 1 pixel. It's this little pale blue dot. And he wrote this beautiful book called The Pale Blue Dot. And there's this incredible quote in there that makes me cry every time I read it. It's just about, everyone you know has, or if you've ever heard of, lives here. And why is it that, we can't all get along? If you don't mind, I'll actually read the quote.
Please do. Oh, you
all
happen
right.
to have it with you.
Well, hang on a second. I gotta go to the website. And I gotta go to, let's see. So here's the image. We actually have an app called Pale Blue Dot Community. There's the image. I don't know
Okay.
if the little dot is showing up there, but it says everyone
All
you
right.
know lives here. Can you read that? Yeah.
Okay.
And here's the quote. He published in 1994. The picture was taken in around 1990, I guess. He says, "Look again at that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to visit, to which our species could migrate. Visit, yes. Settle, not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we have ever known."
Well, that is a beautiful sentiment. And
So it's our only home. It's the only place we're ever going to get.
yeah.
People can talk about moving to Mars. It's not going to happen, right? Not in our lifetimes. We got to get this done.
Yeah. I don't feel so important now that you read that.
Well, you're important to me.
So
I can even do the hearts.
yeah.
There we go.
Oh my, how did you do that?
It's a little Zoom secret I have.
Oh, no, that's remarkable.
Mhm.
So this brings us back to the fact that you came to this diet because you were an environmentalist first.
Right.
And the book you held up there, Food is Climate, this is to me, thank you. This is to me, we know, of course, that this is the optimal human diet for health.
Right.
But for the planet, I mean, how can we play games with the planet?
We can't.
The idea of of chopping down a rainforest to grow soybeans to feed to cattle or to graze the cattle on what used to be a rainforest. This is just the greatest crime you could do against the planet imaginable. And that's the rainforest, and I'm of course thinking of the Amazon, but
Right.
forests all over the world,
Right.
including in the United States, have been chopped down so that people could eat hamburgers, so that people could get heart attacks. And the stupidity of that is just
Mm-hmm.
mind-boggling to me.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't understand why anybody would want to be part of it.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
Um,
This is an all hands on deck moment,
yeah.
and we need to get the hands on deck.
Now you did the important work of raising three children vegan, and at a time when there were less vegans.
Right.
So they must have faced some challenges at school with their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Did they, how was it for them to go through life as a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 10-year-old and say, oh no, we don't eat animals. We think that's wrong. We
Mm-hmm.
don't think that's healthy. Tell us about their experience of being children who were vegans at a time when there were less children who were vegans than there aren't
Right.
many now.
Right. Well, that's a great question. I look back very fondly at, of course, when they were little. They were so cute. We started going to Vegetarian Summerfest, I think, in 1994.
Mhm.
And you're probably, I'm sure you're familiar. I think you've spoken there, haven't you? Or have you not been
No.
to Vegetarian Summerfest? You haven't. Okay. Um, anyway, it to me is the sort of the origin story of the modern lifestyle medicine movement.
Mhm.
Believe it or not. So that's where we all met each other. That's where I met T. Colin Campbell. It's where I met Neil Barnett. It's where I met Michael Clapper. It's where I got to know Michael Greger, who, by the way, is uh, went to Tufts Medical School. And I knew him when he was a medical student. I mean, I went to Tufts Medical School as well, but I graduated many years earlier. Um, although now he's a grown up. I think he just turned 50. What the heck? So anyway, so our kids kind of grew up at Summerfest. And every summer we would go there for these 5 magical days. And they would run around with these other little kids and go to the kids center. And Michael Greger would go there and he'd allow the kids to paint him. He won't talk about that anymore, but they would paint him with watercolors and stick feathers and leaves and things on him. And he got to be this, it was great. Anyway, but that was only 5 days a year, and we referred to the time but the rest of the time is the sort of in between times when we weren't at Summerfest. Because at Summerfest you feel like you're normal, right? Everybody around you is,
Right.
I'll come back to that in a minute. But you're asking about, well, how did the kids, how were they treated by the other kids? I think we're really fortunate. We live in a small town, which is part of a school district, which has got a bigger town attached to it. It's called Rush Henrietta, and so we have these, this big high school, these relative, big elementary schools, and the our kids were kind of regarded as part of diversity. They were just another ethnic group, and it was a time when, and because we come from a woke enough school district, that in a good way, they were treated really, really well with interest, I would say. And so, there would be these school parties or birthday parties or little, where kids were supposed to bring in snacks, and kids would bring in snacks that they knew were okay for our kids. So, just like one of their friends had diabetes, and the friends knew that, well, she had to have certain food. Our kids had to have certain food. And birthday parties in the neighborhood were similar. We'd have vegan birthday cakes. We didn't worry so much about putting them on an Ornish diet because they don't need to. They're little kids, right? They eat healthy most of the time, and they never had animal products. So
Right.
at least, right? So it was. I think it was delightful. I think it actually gave them a lot of perspective about how to treat others, because they knew what it was like to actually be misunderstood at times.
Right.
Right. And I think, when you think about the great sort of, uh, the great artists in the world,
Yeah.
they didn't have like really easy childhoods or really easy lives. They wouldn't have
Right.
anything to write about or paint about, right?
That's right. It
Yeah.
builds character.
And build character.
When I became a vegetarian at 17, and it wasn't something that I liked to talk about, and it
Yeah.
wasn't, I didn't want to have a heart attack, as a young man.
Right.
Um, but I made up my mind to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then if everybody was sharing a pepperoni pizza, I didn't join in,
Right.
and it was no big deal.
Right.
Um, and I don't remember that anybody made fun of me very much for being a vegetarian, but if they did, I wouldn't have cared. I
Right.
mean, I didn't get the gene for caring what other people think.
Okay.
And I think that when you do something that sets you apart that way,
Mm-hmm.
it's to the good.
Right.
It's good to not feel compelled to do things just because everyone else is doing them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I never regretted my decision to go vegetarian, except that I regret that I didn't go vegan when I went vegetarian. That's the thing
Okay.
I regret.
Sure.
I
Sure.
would have stood out more.
Yeah, right. Did you have social, I mean, you feel like you were deprived socially because of like not being invited to parties or
No, looking back at my youth, I don't think anybody didn't invite me to a party because I was a vegetarian. They might have not invited me because they didn't like me. But
uh,
I don't think anybody did invite me because I don't think it was ever held against me that I was vegetarian. But I'll tell you this,
mhm.
as an adult man now and apparently a senior citizen, which I have trouble accepting,
Uh-huh.
um, now living in a neighborhood in the Midwest, my wife and I don't get invited to dinner parties,
Mm,
because vegans,
right,
so now it actually affects us where it didn't affect me in my youth.
right.
It becomes um, necessary to develop friends who are vegans so you
Right,
can socialize.
right,
And I have nothing against non-vegans except for the fact that they're screwing up the planet,
right.
you know.
Mm,
And it's not that I have some moral judgment that uh, that because most of my friends are non-vegans.
mm-hmm.
But uh, it isn't that I judge people on that. It's just that um, I I feel that we have only one planet, and everybody needs to
Right.
realize that it's so easy to just eat human food, and
Mm-hmm.
thereby we could continue to have a planet.
Right.
And I still meet I mean, look, Al Gore is still out there saying that it's just fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
How can he be so blind as to not count the methane that's coming from all the cows,
Right.
the nitrous oxide that comes from the manure, and
Mm-hmm.
the fertilizer used to grow plants to grow
Mm-hmm.
grain for cows, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the forests knocked down to create grazing land for cows.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't any of them say it?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's got to be there has to be an explanation. And we have to look at that. It's not because they're bad people, right?
No.
We have to we do have to figure out like what is that button we can push? Where's like how is it we can get Chuck Schumer to talk about what we
Well,
know he knows.
well,
We
with
know he
Chuck
knows.
Schumer, it's obvious he wants to get reelected. So
Right,
I agree with your point, and I wholeheartedly make the same point that the revolution has to come from the grassroots,
right,
because you just can't expect politicians. And after all, they're some of them are good people, and they're trying to do good things in the world, and therefore they want to get reelected to do the good things, not just.
right,
You could be cynical and say they just want the power or the glory. Well, maybe, but they also, if they're good people, they want to help other people, and so they don't want to lose the election on a symbolic cause that
right.
won't, their vote won't change anything. Um,
Hmm.
but for Al Gore, I don't think he's running for office.
Well, that's true. That's a great question.
Why can't he say the truth that animal agriculture is the leading cause of climate change? Fossil fuels is a factor, but not as
Hmm.
much as animal agriculture. They
Hmm.
don't chop down whole forests to drill for oil or something. You know,
Hmm.
the amount of land use that has been changed because of animal agriculture dwarfs the amount of land use that has been changed because of fossil fuels.
Right.
And I'm not, carrying water for the oil industry,
Right.
but the other thing is that right now, if it's 115 in Phoenix, people need air conditioning.
Right.
And we don't yet have solar powered air conditioners.
Right.
So there's a social good to some of the use of fossil fuels. It keeps
Right.
us comfortable in our homes,
Mm-hmm.
enables transportation and manufacturing. So there is no social good to eating hamburger.
Right.
It's just heart disease and cancer
Mm-hmm.
and lost forests and dirty water
Mm-hmm.
and all kinds of health issues. So there's no social good to it. So it makes no sense.
Right.
So that's why I think we have to do the study of studies.
Okay.
That will
Well,
be the biggest study in human history that
mm-hmm.
will show all the effects within 2 or 3 weeks.
I would love it. Well, what's interesting, I always said when I started Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute back in 2015 that we have to have something that's very scalable,
Yeah.
right? Because this is a huge problem.
Yeah.
We've reached several thousand people, but we need to reach hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
Now we couldn't scale up that quickly, but we do have a system. We have built a platform now that is very scalable, and we have enough trained facilitators and trained physicians that we could go for, we do 50, 60 people a month now. That's how many people we could easily get to 1,000 a month. We could manage that pretty easily. I mean, and certainly if we had it, and it's, the way I would do the study is I wouldn't have it start all at once. I would tell people, I would say,
rolling study.
Right. I would say, look, we're going to start enrolling people on January 1st. And as they start to tell their friends, we run this every month, and sometimes you run 2 a month, and we can do that.
Okay.
We can absolutely do that. And I would love to talk to you offline.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk
results.
about this podcast interview will make history.
Exactly.
First of all, let's not forget there was the discussion of my hernia.
Exactly.
And now we're talking about the study of studies that will make medical history.
Right. And actually, go ahead, finish.
No, you go ahead.
So this study is really not about demonstrating that the diet works. That's been done.
Right.
The studies that need to be done are the ones that actually are how to get people to change their behavior. That's really the issue. When you ask these questions, how can these people know that and they're not doing it? Right. Well, it's something about human behavior. So, the one word if I have to hear the word pilot one more time, my head will explode, because we're always being told by the insurance companies or the self-insured corporations, oh, well, let's run a pilot study. And I'm saying, what do you want to do a pilot study? What, just to show whether going on a whole food plant-based diet works? We know it works, right? The pilot,
right.
What you want to do is figure out how to get everybody to do it. Well, right. Part of what you're talking about is how you would get everybody to do it, because you could have this massive study, and then it would get in the news, and everyone's like, oh, I see. So that's a reason to do a study, is because you want the publicity that it creates.
Right.
And that's, the thing is, we don't have the money. The dairy industry has the money. The beef industry has the money, right? The corn and soybean industries, they have the money. We have to figure out how to fight that. And I think that's a great idea. I love it.
All right. So we will continue that discussion and make this happen.
Yeah.
And I know that the audience will be wanting to hear a follow-up, so I'll have you back again, Ted.
Okay. Sounds great.
Discuss this. And also the audience, wants to know about my hernia. So,
that's true. We're on the edge of our seats.
Yeah.
How's that hernia doing?
So there's going to be a lot of interest there. And next time I'll have to have the ultrasound done properly.
Exactly.
Standing up.
With a technologist who's done many of them. Okay. Truthfully. It's not.
I may have to come to Rochester for this. You may have to do this yourself, Ted. I'm sorry to tell you.
All right. Well, it's not an obvious test. It's not an easy test
Okay.
to get right.
All right.
So yeah,
Well, Ted, it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
absolutely. I
And
feel the same.
tell us where people can go to support the Rochester Lifestyle Institute.
So Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute, if you just Google that, you'll come up with our organization. It's rochesterlifestylemedicine.org. And then our community website is called paleblue.community. The dot is not spelled out, it's a pun. And so it's paleblue.community. Because now there's all these new URLs that can end in things. So community is the thing it ends with. And yeah, come and check out our start with rochesterlifestylemedicine.org. You can learn all about the programs we run. We run multiple programs. The 15-day Whole Food Plant-based Jumpstart we've talked about. We run something called the Lift Project, which is a 10-week program that meets once a week. And both of those are certified by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. The Jumpstart is very intense. That's 7 sessions over 18 days. We also run Lifestyle as Medicine lectures. So I believe you were one of our lecturers
Yes,
recently.
I
Yeah.
enjoy
Okay,
doing that.
right. That was the Lifestyle as Medicine for the Planet, or our LAMP series. And we also run something that's unique, which is the Lifestyle Medicine Grand Rounds, which is actually accredited for CME for healthcare professionals. And we do that every month, where we have an expert panel discusses a case that is presented to them by another physician or a healthcare professional. And we always invite a guest panelist to help with that discussion. So guest panelists we've had include Dr. John McDougall, Dr. Neil Barnett. We just had Kaushik Reddy, who's you probably haven't heard of, but he's a well-known cardiologist in the VA. Who else have we had that's well-known? Michael Clapper. I'm probably forgetting some people, but we've done this over 20 times now, and we've built a library of videos that is unique. So healthcare professionals from around the world can log onto our website. They can get access to these videos. They're also available on YouTube, I believe. And they can watch these after the fact, because there's no real library yet out there of like, okay, I'm a lifestyle medicine practitioner. What do I do in this particular situation? I know I should just tell them to eat a whole food plant-based diet, but it's always a little more complicated than that. Because, they got a mother-in-law that doesn't, that's not on board. They got 2 kids that are crazy that are driving them nuts. They got a dog. They're overweight. They can't exercise. All these things, and so we have actual practitioners talking about how they manage a particular patient. And there's bound to be one in there that will help you with a particular patient, because we've talked about quite a few of them at this point.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in this history-making podcast.
Okay.
To the viewers out there, I say please like and subscribe and comment and tell your friends about this interview, because we're making plant-based history today, and also a little bit of hernia history. So
Absolutely.
So thank you again, Ted, and we'll be talking.
I look forward to that. Thank you.
This has been the Glenn Mercer Show, where everyone listening turns vegan, regains their health, and annoys their friends and relatives. Find us on YouTube at The Glenn Mercer Show and across all your major podcast platforms. Don't forget to subscribe.